What do you do when the family you love becomes the weight that drowns you? When every holiday invitation feels like a summons to judgment? When the home you built as a sanctuary is stolen by those who share your blood? For Catherine, these aren't just questions. They're the battle lines of a life spent fighting for peace. This is the story of a woman who dared to say no, to draw a line, and to reclaim her dignity from the chaos of family. Are you ready to walk her path? My name is Catherine, and I'm 36 years old. I live with my husband, Jared, in a quiet apartment on the outskirts of Denver. We chose a life with no kids, no noise, and no complications. Some call it selfish, but after growing up in a family where loudness bred tension, I call it peace. My family, mom, dad, 2 older sisters, and a gaggle of nieces and nephews, has always been chaotic. My oldest sister, Laura, 42, brims with big ideas but rarely follows through. Megan, 39, is perpetually overwhelmed with 3 kids and a husband who prefers partying to parenting. I'm not close to them, but mom, an emotional woman, always tries to pull me back into the family whirlwind with lines like, "Everyone has to be there, at least for the holidays." This time it was a summer barbecue at my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon. I planned to skip it as usual, but mom called at 7 a.m., her voice a mix of excitement and pressure. "You can't miss it, Catherine. Everyone's coming. It'll feel lonely without you. You're part of this family." I sighed. Jared looked up from the breakfast table, hand resting on his coffee mug, and gave a subtle shrug that meant he'd go if I wanted. Not wanting to disappoint mom again, we decided to show up just for a while. When we arrived, I wanted to turn the car around. My parents' backyard was packed, over 20 people, adults and kids alike. The air hung heavy with beer, barbecue smoke, and sweltering July heat. Laura and Megan were already there, each clutching a margarita, laughing at something not particularly funny. The kids screamed, ran around tables, and tossed food across the lawn. "Oh, finally," Laura called, wobbling over. "Catherine, I thought you were too busy running the world. Got a CEO meeting or something?" She winked, and I clenched my fists to stay calm. I forced a smile and pulled Jared toward Dad, who sat quietly in a small hot tub out back, like he was hiding from the chaos. "You made it," he said simply, handing me a cold bottle of water from the cooler. We tried to be polite, chatting with familiar neighbors, but the vibe was anything but pleasant. Fragmented conversations, glances at my watch, and loaded questions from relatives about, "When are you having kids?" felt more like a trial than a party. Things spiraled when my 3 nieces and nephews, 2 boys and a girl aged 7 to 10, charged toward a guest near the pool's edge. Everything slowed. The oldest shouted, "Push!" and they lunged. The woman stumbled but grabbed the railing, only getting half soaked. Her face said it all. She dried off silently and left, leaving an awkward silence. Before I could react, the kids ran at me next. I caught their movement from the corner of my eye and stepped aside, letting them tumble into the pool. Jared burst out laughing at their spectacular slip, and a few others chuckled until Laura shrieked, "Catherine, why didn't you catch them? They could have drowned." I froze. No one thanked me for avoiding a bigger accident. No one asked why the kids were running wild unsupervised. All I got were blame-filled words and teary, tipsy glares as if I'd pushed them in. That was just the beginning. I drove home, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Jared sat beside me, silent. He didn't need to say anything. I knew he was drained too. The family fun mom always described never existed. Just a polished shell hiding judgment, jealousy, and blame. Ever since I graduated with my MBA and landed a job at a top finance firm in Denver, my life took a different path. I bought my first apartment at 29. 3 years later, I met Jared, a steady civil engineer who supported my choices. We didn't rush to marry, didn't have kids, and kept our plans private from my family. That was the only way to maintain peace. Still, silence didn't stop the prying eyes. Laura and Megan, both full-time moms, gave off a vibe whenever I mentioned work trips abroad or posted photos from Italy, Iceland, or New Mexico. Their half-joking comments, "Must be nice not to worry about diapers, or only people without kids live like that," carried bitterness, like I had something they dreamed of but couldn't hold. 2 years ago, after a weekend getaway in Breckenridge, I bought a small mountain cabin. Nestled in a pine forest with a snowy view of the Rockies, it was my perfect escape. But I knew my family, especially Laura, would flip if I registered it under my name. So, I had my parents hold the title as an early retirement gift, though I paid for everything: the purchase, taxes, upkeep. First it worked. My parents were discreet and only visited occasionally. Then I stumbled across a stranger's social media post. A photo of my cabin with hashtag Airbnb retreat and the caption, "Hidden Gem in Breckenridge, hosted by Laura. Highly recommend." I read it 3 times. Not only were they using my cabin, but they were renting it out for profit. I didn't react immediately, I needed proof. Over the next few weeks I monitored posts, Airbnb reviews, and had a friend book a weekend stay. Sure enough, it was listed under Laura's name, with over 20 reviews and rates from $350 to $500 a night. At 2 weekends a month, Laura could be pocketing at least $3,000 from a place she didn't pay a dime for. Megan wasn't innocent either. Once, Jared and I dropped by unannounced to check the heating system before winter, and found a strange family grilling on the porch. One man said casually, "Oh, Megan told us to come today. Her family's joining later." I didn't say anything, just left a message with Mom. But I understood. They thought that because the cabin was under my parents' names, they could treat it like their own. Worse, they turned it into a moneymaker. I used to think staying quiet kept the peace. But when silence shields greed and disrespect, patience stops being kindness, it becomes a trap. So I started planning. No more letting others decide for me. No more mistaking my silence for consent. 3 days after the barbecue, my phone blew up with sarcastic texts and outright anger. "Laura, you're so selfish. Not wanting kids is your choice, but that doesn't mean you get to stand apart from the family. Megan, we're working hard raising our kids while you just enjoy life. That cabin should be a family place, not your private asset." Before I could reply, their husbands chimed in. Daniel, Laura's husband, sent a half-joking, half-threatening text. "If I'd known you'd pull this stunt, I wouldn't have left that gate unlocked." I wasn't sure if it was a threat or a slip, but it was enough. I blocked them all. Jared squeezed my shoulder and turned on Do Not Disturb on my phone. I thought that was the end, but on Thursday afternoon Mom called, her voice tense. "Catherine, we want a family meeting. No kids. Tomorrow 6 p.m. Please don't say no." I wanted to refuse but said yes for Mom and myself. I needed to face this one last time. The meeting was in my parents' living room, once filled with cheerful family photos, now a backdrop for confrontation. Laura and Megan sat on one side, faces cold. Daniel and Brad, Megan's husband, sat with arms crossed, not even saying hello. Mom spoke first, her voice calm. "There's been tension. We need to talk it out. No yelling, no blaming, just the truth." I nodded, then said it straight, no sugarcoating. "I know you've been renting out the Breckenridge cabin for profit. I have proof. From today, no one uses it without my permission." Megan shot up. "I didn't make money off it. I just let friends borrow it. How dare you?" Laura cut her off but didn't look at me. She turned to Mom. "Fine, I listed it on Airbnb a few times, but only to help pay for the kids' tuition. That cabin's under Mom and Dad's name. It's not Catherine's personal property." I looked her in the eye. "You know I've paid the loan, taxes, and maintenance. Mom and Dad only hold the title to avoid complications. But if you want to talk ownership, I have every document to transfer it to my name anytime." The air froze. Daniel mumbled, "So you bought a house just to show off? That's a bit much." I didn't reply. Dad, silent until now, spoke. Everyone quiet. He rarely raised his voice, so everyone listened. "That cabin was bought by Catherine, your mother, and I hold the title to keep things simple. From now on, no one goes there unless she says so." Silence. Then Laura sighed like something clicked. "All right. If you don't want to share, at least help us. Tuition's a burden. You're comfortable, no kids. You should." I cut in, voice low and cold. "You're saying I should fund your kids' tuition because I don't have children? Because I work hard and live frugally?" Megan jumped in. "We're not asking for everything, just a bit. It's for the family." I let out a sharp laugh. Family isn't an excuse to take advantage. I don't owe anyone here a thing. Jared placed his hand on my back, signaling it was time to leave. As I turned, Mom called out, her voice tight. "Catherine." I stopped just long enough to say without turning, "I love you, Mom, but I'm done playing the fool." I walked out of that house, and out of the role of the nice little sister they'd always cast me in. But I knew it wasn't over. People who feed off others' kindness never let go easily. 3 weeks later, I started to feel peace. No guilt-tripping texts, no late-night calls from Mom. I thought the storm had passed. I was naive. That Friday, Jared and I were at a friend's dinner when I got a message from Brandon, the property manager I hired for the cabin. 3 words. "They got in." Before I could reply, he called voice urgent. I got a motion alert from the gate camera. 2 men used bolt cutters to break the chain lock. The gate's damaged. "I've called the police, they're on their way." I stood frozen in the kitchen, ears ringing. They came through the back door, broke the lock. I saw their faces on camera. It was Daniel and Brad. Jared took the phone to speak to Brandon. I trembled, not from fear, but from rage so intense I could barely breathe. We left the dinner immediately. In the car, Jared held my hand, but I said nothing the whole ride home. My chest was a storm of anger, disappointment, and bitterness. I tried to distance myself from their mess, yet they dragged me back in. The next day, the Summit County Sheriff's Office called. Daniel and Brad were caught red-handed, attempting to disable the living room camera. They faced 3 charges: unlawful entry, property damage, and criminal intimidation. They claimed they were retrieving family belongings. I requested the footage and incident report. Brandon sent the video. Daniel cutting the chain, then he and Brad forcing the back door so hard the hinges snapped. Brad even looked at the camera and flipped it off as if daring me. This wasn't impulsive. They came with tools, a plan, and intent to trespass. I wasn't staying quiet anymore. That afternoon, Mom called. "Catherine, I heard what happened. The boys got carried away, but they didn't mean harm. They think you're being too harsh." I froze. "Too harsh?" I repeated, each syllable cutting into my chest. "They broke into my cabin, damaged the gate, busted the door, and tried to disable my security system." Her voice trembled. "I just want you to reconsider. If you drop the charges, it won't go to court. Brad works in security. If he gets a record, he could lose his job." I gripped the phone tighter. Jared watched me with worried eyes. "Mom," I said, forcing calm. "They crossed every line. This isn't just resentment or jealousy. They illegally entered my property and caused damage, fully aware. You want me to pretend it didn't happen?" She went silent. "I've put up with them my whole life," I continued, voice dropping. "Not anymore. This is the line. And if you stand with them, I can't keep this relationship." I ended the call. That night, I wrote to my attorney, Charlotte Green, asking her to handle all communication with law enforcement and the DA's office. I also requested a restraining order barring Daniel and Brad from me or my property. I didn't know how far the case would go, but I wasn't backing down. I was no longer patient, soft-spoken Catherine, enduring to keep the peace. They broke the lock, literally and figuratively, and unleashed a different version of me. After the break-in, something collapsed inside me. It wasn't the physical damage. I could fix a gate, replace locks, install new security. What broke was trust. It wasn't the first time my family hurt me, but this time something snapped. Jared couldn't hide his exhaustion. That night, as I reviewed police reports and the lawsuit draft, he sat beside me. The living room light reflected off his glasses, his voice slow but edged with bitterness. "Catherine, I know you love your parents, but this has gone too far. If you want to cut ties completely, I'll support you. I don't want to see you drag through this anymore." I didn't answer right away, but I knew he was right. He no longer smiled when I mentioned my sisters or suggested giving them another chance. He'd stayed quiet long enough, and now he wanted to walk away from something he never chose. I didn't want him carrying this burden with me. The next day I called Brandon. He'd handled maintenance, but now I signed a full-service contract. New cameras, smart locks, anti-climb fencing, and 24/7 monitored security. Brandon, a cautious former security officer living with his elderly mother nearby, was someone I trusted completely. "I'll treat this place like my own," he said. "No one steps in without permission." Since then, I haven't returned to Breckenridge. I receive routine reports and camera photos, snow blanketing the entrance, sunsets casting red light across the trees. The mountains are still beautiful, the forest quiet, But I no longer feel peace thinking about that cabin. It used to be my retreat, reminding me who I was. Now I hear bolt cutters slicing metal, the crash of the back door, and see the angry faces of two men who once called me sister. My sisters, if I can still call them that, didn't stop. Despite blocking their numbers, emails, and social media, they reached me through new accounts, even handwritten letters sent to my attorney's office. The last, in Megan's neat handwriting, arrived on a Tuesday. She begged me to reconsider my harsh decision, claiming Daniel and Brad acted out of emotion. The final lines made my skin crawl. If you can't help with the kids' tuition, at least don't destroy their future. I folded the letter, locked it in a drawer, and sat alone in my office, staring at a real estate listing. I typed, "Mountain cabin for sale in Breckenridge. 3 bedrooms, mountain view. Price negotiable." Jared stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "That place isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's a symbol of betrayal. I don't want to live where every door reminds me of injustice. No one can feel safe in a violated space. And I need safety. Selling the cabin isn't about money. It's about control. Letting them know that if they thought they could take anything through pressure, tears, or hollow promises, they picked the wrong person. I'm ending this game on my terms. Once I clear every trace of the past from that cabin, nothing will tie me down. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to destroy someone's life. I'm learning to clean house, not just the property, but the toxic ties that should have been cut long ago. One Monday, during a legal meeting, the receptionist handed me a courier envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, a bank check for $5,000, and 2 signatures, Daniel and Brad. The letter was brief. They admitted trespassing, apologized for their impulsive actions, and asked me to drop the charges to protect their jobs and families. They promised never to return to the cabin and offered to sign any agreement if I'd end the case. I held the check unmoved. $5,000 wouldn't undo what they did, but it was the first time they showed accountability, at least on paper. That evening, I brought the letter to Charlotte, my sharp, practical attorney. She read it, then looked over her thin-rimmed glasses. "Catherine, if you want to pursue this in court, I'll support you. But litigation will take a year, drain your energy and finances, and you might walk away with nothing but exhaustion." I nodded, tired of the drama. I needed closure, but on terms that made this their final chance. 3 days later, Charlotte drafted a civil settlement. The terms were clear. Daniel and Brad would pay all repair costs, add $2,500 for emotional distress and wasted time, cover my legal fees, and sign a binding agreement prohibiting contact with me or Jared. If they violated it, I could reopen the criminal case. "We don't need heartfelt apologies," Charlotte said bluntly. "We need them to fear consequences." That weekend, the brothers-in-law met at Charlotte's office with their attorney. I wasn't there, but Charlotte said the atmosphere was tense. Brad signed silently. Daniel tried to negotiate the $2,500 down, but Charlotte cut him off. "You're free to go to court. We'll present every piece of evidence. Unauthorized rentals, threatening texts, and that lovely clip of you flipping off the camera." Daniel fell silent and signed. A copy of the agreement reached me, along with checks for $2,500 and $3,200 for legal fees. I didn't feel happy or relieved, but something clearer, firmer. I'd taken back control, not through yelling or conflict, but through the law. That evening, Jared opened a bottle of wine we'd been saving. "We're done," he said, raising his glass. I smiled, the first time in weeks without anger or regret. "Not quite," I replied. "But this ends one chapter. It's the first page of a life without them." I knew I'd never be close to my sisters again. That wasn't a tragedy, it was freedom. A month after the settlement, a package arrived at my doorstep. No return address, just familiar handwriting. "Catherine, read if you want." It was from Megan. I left it untouched for 3 days. Part of me hoped they'd understood that my actions weren't to punish but to protect myself. But the guarded part stopped me. On a quiet Sunday evening, I made tea and opened the envelope. Inside was a long letter. No excuses, no blame, just acknowledgement. Megan wrote about pressure, expectations, and how she let envy override her dignity. "You've always reminded me of what I never had the courage to choose. A life I made for myself." I read it, folded it, and placed it in a nightstand drawer. I didn't tear it up, but I didn't respond. I respected her honesty, but my decision stood. No contact. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Since the settlement, Jared and I have focused on what matters. We took a road trip to Santa Fe, driving empty mountain highways with no cell signal, no unwanted calls, no echoes of the past. I started writing again, short stories, notes in my old leather journal, even articles on rebuilding boundaries with family. Maybe one day I'll share them. I still keep the cabin, though I don't visit much. Brandon manages it, sending weekly photos. Snow on the entrance, sunsets over the trees. The cabin is no longer something taken from me. It's what it was meant to be. A place to breathe. Mom still calls, not often, but enough to show she's trying. We talk about small things, her garden, a new almond cake recipe, Dad's workout routine. She never mentions Laura, Megan, or what happened. I respect that. Once she said, "You sound peaceful. I can hear it in your voice." I smiled. I had to learn from scratch, Mom. But this time, I don't feel guilty for choosing myself. That was the biggest lesson. In families, love is sometimes used to control, intrude, or demand sacrifice. But real love comes from respect. I don't need a loud family to feel I belong. I need someone who listens, a space to be myself, and peace undisturbed by warped expectations. I'm still the youngest. That hasn't changed. But I no longer bow down to keep others happy. Catherine's story reminds us that those closest to us can hurt us most. Instead of enduring, she stood up, protected her boundaries, and reclaimed her dignity. In a world where kindness is often exploited, saying no isn't selfish, it's strength. Catherine became a voice for anyone trapped in a toxic family cycle, showing you have the right to choose the life you deserve.